Cool. All right. Thanks for being here, Ben.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I really
Excited
appreciate
to do
it.
it.
I'm going to share my screen. All right. So I wanted to set the stage first. So everybody, for everybody here, Scholars provides talent management solutions for companies to help their HR and recruiting teams hire new talent more effectively. So Ben, I would just love to hear from you. Can you give us a sort of elevator pitch on Scholars for our audience here?
Yeah, for sure. I think you hit the high level. Basically, we work with companies mainly in the Fortune 2000 to help them grow their employer brands and overall hire better interns and recent grads. So it takes on a lot of different forms, I guess, depending on who we're working with and what their kind of goals and strategies are. But from like the highest level, basically working with these companies to help them with strategy and providing analytics and insights that are going to kind of bridge the gap between their employer branding and recruitment marketing teams and then the actual university recruiters who are kind of boots on the ground talking to students trying to or recent grads and trying to get them to join the company.
Cool. I wanted to learn more about, content, obviously. So the thing that I'm most curious about right now is, you started almost 2 years ago. Why did you decide to kick off your marketing strategy with content first?
Well, I feel like for us, it was honestly just the lowest barrier of entry to get going. I mean, we're a small company, still obviously even smaller back then. And so creating content, for us to actually sit down and do it was free. So we started doing that initially, but always sort of understood from like the SEO perspective, that it takes a while, but once it gets going, pretty valuable. So for us, wanted to kind of start that from day one, so that once we were 6 or 12 months into the company, it was really kind of driving a lot of growth and traffic for us, and we kind of figured that from day one we knew the problem we were trying to solve, we knew the path that we were on, and so we felt like starting to create content from them, even if the solution sort of pivoted, the content would always kind of be relevant. So it made sense to kind of get going from day one, just to make sure that it was ready as the company was growing.
Cool. Um, Great. So it seems like you're pretty aware that, education would be super important, education and awareness. Was it ever on the table for you to consider any kind of paid acquisition first, or did you always know you wanted to do a content first approach?
Um, Honestly, we've never done paid acquisition. It just never really made sense for us. We felt like we were just going to have more valuable customers and users if they came organically.
Mhm.
So honestly, never really considered doing anything paid,
Mm.
at
Um,
least not at the beginning.
yeah. And maybe we can get into some of the other, we'll get into the rest of the marketing stuff later. So, why did you choose to engage Growth Machine specifically and not a different agency?
Um, Honestly, so I heard Nat, it may have been y'all's podcast, but I heard Nat on a podcast just kind of talking. I think he was talking to the guys who are at Demand Curve, which
Oh,
I guess
yeah.
is like another kind of agency turned into more of like a educational thing, I guess now. But that's how I initially found out about you guys. Nat seemed really smart, and so I ended up just reaching out to him and talking to him just kind of generally about some strategy stuff. He then sent over a lot of stuff to us, which included sort of like an initial kind of content plan that we actually used before we started working with you guys.
Mhm.
We used like your writer finder thing initially. So we took that strategy that Nat worked with us and then hired a writer from you guys. So we probably had like 20 to 30 articles up by the time we really started
Mhm.
working together. But that's how we initially found out about it.
Cool. Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the content strategy now. Let's start with the content strategy when we first started working together, and sort of, how would you describe the content plan at the beginning?
So initially for our business, we were focused on kind of matching students with startups and kind of SMBs. And so initially the content was focused on those keywords and searches. So it was a lot around like how to hire an intern or like a job description for a certain type of intern, sort of with the hope that, if you're searching for that kind of stuff, you're in the market and looking for a way to actually find this person.
Mhm.
And so originally it was kind of all like focused on who our actual paying customers were.
Cool. And then, I mean, one thing that we like to say over here at Growth Machine is, we like to advise our clients to wait, closer to 6 months to see real measurable results. But we also say that as a pretty conservative number, just because uh, there could be any number of reasons why content might not rank well. It could be a website not being set up correctly. Could just be, it happens when there's a very new site, but it's also just to give us some time to pivot our plan if we need to. And so, I mean, I have in my notes that just about 3 months in or so, we had the data that this probably wasn't the best approach. The content that was like how to hire for an intern, and really just it was organic traffic wasn't growing at the rate that we wanted it to. So we pivoted to reaching your target audience's target audience. So that sort of B2B to C play and targeting the college graduates or college students themselves. So I'd love to talk about this pivot a little bit more. Can you tell us kind of how you landed on this pivot, maybe as a business, and speak to how we supported you on this?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like you said, I think it just really wasn't moving the needle at all, really, to be focusing on, writing articles that were for our customers. We were doing a lot of like outbound stuff at that point too, as far as reaching customers, and that was working. And so really the pivot came down to like, we basically what we're selling at the end of the day is like we're the expert in the space and we know how to help you find these people, and what they're looking for. And so it was just sort of like a natural progression from, if that's what we're selling, and that's who we need to reach anyway to build a brand amongst those people to actually execute on what we're selling to our customers, then it might make more sense to just kind of focus on them, because one, it was driving a lot of traffic, or it ended up doing that. But one, potentially at that time, we thought it could drive a lot of traffic to get students kind of in our network that we could then help them find jobs.
Mhm.
Um, and then it also served the purpose of like kind of being the example and the, thought leader in the space of, hey, if you're trying to reach these people, these are the types of things that you should be doing as well. So it kind of, the content in general kind of played that pretty nicely for us.
Cool. And then on my next slide, there we go. So I think so we started working together on content in January 2020 or so. And then in this graph, we can see for the first couple months on that the focus on the content that was like how to hire for internship. The traffic, was relatively flat, or it wasn't growing as well as we wanted it to. But after about 6 months or so, or no, sorry, not 6 months, 6 weeks or so, when we had been publishing that content that was geared towards the end user, we saw that organic traffic was on a really nice uptick. Um, yeah, so there was our pivot in like April, May, where we had like about a solid month to like get going on a new content plan and produce like, I think around a dozen new articles. And now, our traffic is growing pretty steadily. So, we can see here that content has been, it's been more successful. We've been growing the traffic. Um, but I'm curious about how did you know how this was working for your business specifically? Like, or like kind of when did you realize it was really growing the business?
Yeah. So, I mean, what we started doing was just leveraging these articles to kind of collect emails. So we're trying to grow an email list, and then also just kind of like a user list of students. so I think we ended up getting like 20,000 emails during this time. So, I mean, that was kind of a pretty obvious metric to look at of like, this is at least hitting home with that
Mhm.
audience. And then we were able to kind of use our email list to basically, collect other survey data and just other kind of metrics that our customers were interested in. So it wasn't, directly driving revenue, obviously, but
Mhm.
it was kind of allowing us to execute on the things that we needed to do for our um, customers. But I guess as far as like the metric to where we knew it was working was, I mean, I think just the email list growth for sure.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I mean, because that's sort of the proof that it's, I mean, it points to the fact that you are growing a captive audience. Um, and growing from 0 to 20,000 subscribers in just over a year is incredible. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot of people.
Yeah.
And then, we were able to kind of prove like, okay, this is what this audience is looking for. So it sort of helped us
Mhm.
kind of drive the strategies that, like I said, our customers are looking to implement as well. So
Cool.
yeah, I mean, it's good all around for sure.
That's great. And then, I mean, this on the screen is just a screen. It's a screenshot of the email capture on your site. Is this pretty much what it looked like the whole time, or did you do anything else? I guess on the UI front to capture emails.
No, I mean, it's basically it. Yeah, it's
Mhm.
not a great looking tool. It's literally just like a WordPress plugin. But I think the content that they were reading was good enough that they wanted the opportunity to get either like the first glance at it or other things that we share through our emails. So
Mhm.
this is basically what it's been like the whole time.
That's awesome. I mean, it really do, but it also just goes to show that when you're producing valuable content for your audience, you don't need all the fancy, crazy pop-ups. I mean, this looks nice, but like you don't need the crazy animation or the catchy or gimmicky. Like, do you want amazing content versus no, I want to stay uninformed.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I mean, our
um,
audience specifically, they're trying to land jobs and internships. So like when you're trying to do that, at least you're going to do anything you can. So it wasn't, overly, we didn't have to do a whole lot to collect emails, I don't think.
mhm, that's cool. So let's also talk about your podcast. I want to talk about this because this was something that was kind of born out of the pivoted content strategy. So the internship show, which launched about a year ago, um, it similar to the content strategy, it appeals to that end user demographic of college students and new grads. You interview a lot of university and campus recruiters, like people from Keurig, Dr. Pepper, the beverage company, Dick's Sporting Goods, Northwestern Mutual, and many more. What inspired this podcast?
Um, so we launched the podcast in, I think, April of 2020. So
Mhm.
like a month after COVID started. So for us, I mean, it was a good way to continue to keep the conversations going with a lot of the people that we were, trying to sell to at these companies. Honestly, a lot of them were in the groups that were either like furloughed or laid off. And so for us, it just wasn't a time, and for a lot of people, obviously, it wasn't a time of massive revenue growth. So we kind of just started it to make sure that people kept getting on the phone with us. But I think the content was just really good and something that not a lot of other people were putting out. So we ended up getting, we get like over 20,000 downloads a month on it now.
Great.
And that growth happened like pretty quickly after we started it.
Mhm.
But then it kind of served a lot of purposes of obviously, continuing the conversation with these people, putting out really good content for students, but also being able to turn that into other forms of content, whether it's like video or you guys did a lot of blogs from it. So it was just a great way to kind of collect a lot of information and data that we just sort of needed across the board for the company.
That's awesome. I was going to ask about how you're measuring success, and obviously you have a pretty crazy amount of downloads. I mean, that from what I've seen in podcasting in general, that's a lot for a relatively new show. Um,
Yeah.
so it's awesome, and that you're using it to kind of make content more sustainable across the rest of your marketing, which I just really love. So maybe we can talk a little bit about the podcast and content strategy here. We do some of that podcast optimization for you, where we turn some of the podcast episodes into articles. So like this is an example of an article about like what it's like to land an internship at Cardinal Health, and then lower on the page there's, oh, we're on the podcast, we spoke to this person. So I think it's a really nice way to kind of make these things more cohesive,
Yeah.
and to just kind of make sure you're getting the most bang for your buck. um I guess like, how do you manage this such that like, do you have like a certain goal that you try to hit for each episode? Like, is it each episode must become one blog post, or just curious about how you think about the content and tactics there?
Um, Not necessarily. I think it just depends on who we're talking to. Like, there's definitely better opportunities for certain, kind of like we've talked to, Twitch and a lot of like the bigger San Francisco like tech startups tend to have bigger kind of opportunity from like a blog perspective, just as far as search volumes and stuff. Um, but for us, I mean, the number one thing we're looking for is just putting out good content and getting on the phone with who potentially could be, a customer for us. And then kind of the content that comes from it, whether it's social or blog or something we use in our email, ends up just being sort of secondary, I think, depending on just how good the episode turns out and if it's something that students are actually searching for or not.
Mm-hmm. That's cool.
Yeah.
um let's kind of end. I want to wrap up soon so we can have some Q&A here. um let's talk about how this, let's talk about some of the great companies that you work with. I know you work with some great companies like Paychex, and Cardinal Health, obviously. But I'm curious about how they enter the marketing funnel. Like, how did they come to be leads?
Um, so Paychecks and Cardinal Health are probably a little bit different. Those were both like some of our first customers. So well, actually, I think they both came from the podcast. So like we reached out just to have them on as a guest, and then that was kind of the starting point for the conversation, and that just kind of led to conversations with other people at the company, and then eventually them becoming a customer.
Mhm.
Now we're actually getting a lot of inbounds asking to come on the show, which also then kind of follow that same funnel typically of podcast guests to customer, but those specifically I think were outreach from us to get them on.
Cool. I feel like it's always fun when you see successful marketing like this and being able to connect the dots going backwards, because it becomes more obvious in hindsight. Because now, like, the story that I'm hearing is, you grew your site through, you grew the organic traffic of your site by creating valuable content for this end user of entry level job seekers, new grads. um, Retain them with your email list, and grew the audience there, and now you have this treasure trove really of the people who your potential customers want to reach out to. And then from there, you developed a podcast because you already had that captive audience to market it to. It wasn't that you launched a podcast and thought, oh, I hope someone listens. It was, you launched a podcast for your audience that you have, and then that continues to attract more customers.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's pretty much hit the nail on the head there.
Cool. I do have a couple last questions to wrap up. I guess, now that we've been working together for about a year or so, what might be your advice be in anybody who is hiring and managing a content agency or a content function, really?
um Honestly, I don't feel like we've had to really like manage the agency, so I would say like that would be the number one thing that if we were doing this again we would look for, is like working with you guys. It's been very like I don't even have to do anything, honestly. Like, you guys set the strategy, you write the articles, and then it gets published and taken care of, and I get the reporting weekly or monthly. Now we've started to obviously bring that writing in house, and we hired our own full time SEO and content person on our team, and so she's handling all of that now, but you guys are still helping us with kind of setting the strategy and doing the link building. But as far as, looking for an agency, I mean, if you're having to manage the process, I feel like you're, at least for me, I would feel like we're not working with the right team.
Yeah, that's good advice. I mean, I've definitely been in positions before where I've had to do a lot of managing of the agency and it wasn't fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's our last slide. Um, yeah, I mean, I think we have, oh, quick question. What's next for Scholars and I guess, yeah, what's next? What are you excited about?
We're launching a new product in July. It'll kind of like streamline a lot of the strategy and things that we're doing now with our customers, which should make it a lot easier to kind of pull in data and let them sort of look at their own strategies and metrics in real time, which will just make, honestly, for us, working with them a lot easier. And for them, they won't have to rely on us to deliver kind of manual reporting and insights to them. So I'm excited to get that off the ground. And then, yeah, I mean, we're still working on the podcast. We've launched a couple kind of spin-off shows from it. One called the Weekly Roundup, and then another one which is called Office Hours, where basically we just get a ton of questions because of the internship show. So we've decided to kind of answer those live and publish that. Yeah, grown a lot, and just kind of excited for the next couple of months to get this product off the ground.
That's awesome. Cool. We are working on the case study together. That'll be out in the next day or two. If anyone has further questions, you can reach me at amanda@growthmachine.com. I'm going to address some of the questions that came through.
Okay.
Okay. Nick asked, did you originally start with content in-house? And if so, what led to you switching to outsourcing versus keeping it in-house?
So we basically been outsourcing it from the beginning. We hired a writer kind of from day one, through you guys, through the writer finder, to do it. I think we had a company before this, where we tried to write articles and do a blog in-house. And it honestly is just like not seeing results for 6 months and then having to get yourself up to go try to continue writing something in month like 4 when nothing's happening is really hard. And so for us, outsourcing it just to make sure like the consistency was there was kind of why we have been doing it from day one that way.
Cool. And that makes sense to me. I mean, hire experts to help you get started. And I really love that you brought some of that in-house. And now it's sort of like you graduated from that earlier package where we worked together. And now, we're still continuing to collaborate, but now you have, you're better equipped to manage it yourselves.
Yeah.
And then we have another question here that is, how do you make money, and have you seen an increase in revenue since the blog and podcast have taken off?
So it's like pretty typical SaaS revenue model. I think it's hard to kind of attribute where necessarily the revenue growth is coming from. I think having the podcast and the blogs and just doing things that actually prove that we are kind of experts in the space are leading to companies just sort of, trusting and believing that they, can work with us and we're going to provide value. Because I mean, we're a small company and that's just what we're up against. So, I mean, it definitely hasn't hurt by any means. And I mean, I'm sure it's helping. It's just hard to obviously attribute exactly where the growth is coming from.
Yeah, I think attribution with content can be really tricky. Sometimes in SaaS companies, you're able to, figure out whatever the last click attribution or first click attribution might be. For us in our content, I would say that it usually just tends to come from asking the client themselves. Like sometimes we'll have clients that say, "Hey, we listen to your podcast. Let's work together." Sometimes, we also have some UTM parameters in our links across our website, so we can at least kind of track where people are coming from when they come to our contact us page. So that's been kind of helpful for us.
Yeah.
Cool. And then Dejan asked if we will be sending this recording. Of course, we will, to everybody who registered, and especially the people who have attended today. And then we will have the case study in the next day or two. I need to finish that up. And then, yeah, I mean, as we wrap up, Ben, is there anything that we didn't discuss that you wanted to mention?
Um, no, I mean, I feel like we covered a lot. Obviously, like you said, we've kind of gone through the whole cycle of working together from like the writer finder to you guys managing the whole process, to now sort of, graduating and bringing everything in-house. I mean, I would say outside of the blog, like the podcast has been the best thing that we've ever done for our company. Especially just like being in B2B space. I would highly suggest that everybody try to launch some sort of way to get on the phone with potential customers where you're not just like selling them a product. But other than that, I feel like we covered pretty much everything. So
Great. Yeah. On that note, I mean, I think it's a podcast. Having a podcast and inviting your prospects is just such a great way to establish that trust and credibility, in a pretty efficient way.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Cool. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for today. We will send the recording. Have a great rest of your day. For those of you who felt kind of meh, hope you feel better. Get some coffee. But yeah, um, have a have a great day, everybody. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thanks, Ben.
See ya.